let me try and maybe reflect on many of the points that have been raised in what I'm going to say. But let me begin by making a couple of general points about where multilateral development finance debate is going. Today, the debate, if I could summarize it, is the following. How do we get the World Bank Group and the MDBs to go from being lending institutions to becoming leveraging institutions? That's the challenge that's being put to us. And I think that why is it that this is the question that's being put? Well, first, development finance and corporate finance was originally seen as two different ways of financing an economy. Over time, we began to see them as the same finance with different risk profiles. And finally, we are recognizing that development finance is just no longer available, but you really have to move development finance to leverage capital markets to give you blended finance. So we're in the world of blended finance, and can blended finance be leveraged to deliver to countries like India and countries in Africa? And how should one do it? The representative of Kenya mentioned that in the summit that they're going to have, they're actually going to talk about a new financial architecture, right? Which basically begins to say that perhaps the World Bank Group is not delivering what it needs to deliver, and there's a new financial architecture that's needed. So let me try and talk about this new financial architecture as it relates to energy security, which is what you've asked me to talk about. But let me begin by giving you a non-energy example. Just 2 months ago in Ethiopia, in middle of its challenges, has introduced the first private telecom operator. All these years, it was a state telecom operator. It is now a private telecom operator. And you have companies like Vodacom, Africa, Vodacom, UK, Japan Investment are putting in $1.8 billion into this telecom operator. They've come to MIGA, the Multilateral Guarantee Institution, and we have used $175 million as our base to guarantee $1.2 billion of private investment into Ethiopia, right? Not a single multilateral loan here. It's $175 million of our capital, which we have guaranteed, and we've structured the guarantee to attract $1.2 billion of private money. Now, if you step back, MIGA was created in 1988 as one of the institutions of the World Bank, and we were given $366 million. We have never been capitalized ever since. Since 1988, that $366 million we have converted into $72 billion of private sector investments around the world, right? For every dollar that we guarantee, 65 cents we resell into private reinsurers. That's how our 366 is being multiplied across our programs. Today, our leverage is for every $1 we put in, we bring in $15 of private capital. I gave you the example of telecom in Ethiopia. We just, a couple of years ago, we guaranteed private investment in a solar park in Egypt, which sold electricity to the public distribution sector. That solar park raised money in the capital market at 6 notches better rating than Egypt's sovereign rating. That's because of the guarantee we put in. Because of our guarantee, we now have, for example, in Malawi, a major solar project with battery storage. We have similarly in Gabon a hydroelectric power that we are guaranteeing. Similarly, we are about to do a guarantee of mini grids in Uganda. All of it is bringing in private capital in through this leveraging story. Now, we're beginning to now move from transactions orientation to moving towards much more programmatic way. So in India, for example, we spent $2 billion in the freight corridor of India, which is basically is an electrified freight corridor. So we're beginning to move diesel-based freight movement from the road onto electrified freight corridor. You can imagine the greenhouse gas emission it saves. Now what India has done is it's asked us to take DFCCIL as a company into the global markets. So $2 billion of IBRD now follows a MIGA guarantee so DFCCIL can bring in private capital. This is an example of where you take the greenfield risks with IBRD and then pass it on to MIGA to go into the market. If we can now, in India, take Power Grid that still has $1 billion of IBRD past its greenfield risk and a few other investments, pool it together and take it to the market, we would be able to bring in huge amounts of money into development. This can be done in Africa. It is being done in Africa. It can be done in scale in Africa, and it can be done elsewhere. But remember, $366 million, that's all we got. Imagine today that the G7 had the courage to put in another $366 million into us, right? If we did 72 billion, we will do another 72 billion in development. So when countries ask for new financial architecture, they need to look at existing financial architecture and see how can you move from lending into leveraging. Having said that, I must say something very important. Lending was seen once about money into my own country, Bangladesh, or Africa, etc. But in fact, what it is lending into projects which is dedicated to state capability. It's to build state capability. It's to build institutions. We're very proud that India's grid, we've been part of it, our 15-year journey. We want to be part of 15-year journeys in Africa as Africa builds its grid. That's the lending power that it transmits into building capacity. You cannot replace that with leveraging power. MIGA cannot leverage state capability. We can leverage capital markets, but not state capability. This is where the lending and leveraging has to come together. That's a very different way of working on financial institutions than the traditional ones. The future lies in the World Bank Group transforming itself into a leveraging institution, but in which it does not give up its ability to partner with states and building state capability. If the two don't come together, you are not going to be able to really deliver on development. But when you deliver finance at scale, you have to delink state capability from access to finance, which means we have to discover new instruments of how to deliver state capability. You can delink, but you mustn't de-emphasize. So the future to us is we will bring capital markets in. We've been doing that, and we'll be able to do it. And the role of MIGA is going to grow in IBRD, IDA, and IFC. And I think that we will find ourselves that Africa, which, by the way, people will not believe this, 30% of MIGA guarantee is in Africa. That's the largest investment. So your question about the perception of risk, we're unbundling that perception for Africa. That sub-Saharan Africa's 30% of MIGA is not known. But we hope in the next round, as we move up, we will be able to really bring in more of the investors. But what we want to do is bring in South-South investments much more across Africa. And what I heard today gives us that kind of a base.
So Junaid, before we thank you for your intervention, I have a question for you. As the world moves increasingly towards a fast evolving technology-driven landscape for energy and for development, are you convinced that the managers of MIGA and the bureaucracy in DC, the bank generally, is being able to keep up with both these objectives of leverage as well as of building state capacity? And how is the institute itself responding? I am hearing complaints that potentialism is at its peak in DC at a time when we need a new pioneering ethic defining the bank?
So I have to be careful how I answer that question. We have a new president, President Ajay Banga. And President Ajay Banga is talking about transforming the bank and making it future ready. So what he's saying is a bigger and better bank is not sufficient. It's a different bank that we need. And surely we were created during Bretton Woods in 1947, and we have evolved since. Today the world is different. Today the very governments that we serve must be much greater owners of who we are and transform who we need to be. So there is, I think, a major change process that's ongoing with MDBs. What I explained about MIGA, most people have not heard of MIGA, right? As President Banga says, I have a secret weapon, it's called MIGA, except the problem is it's too secret, right? Very few people know that we've converted 366 million to 72 billion development of finance, of which 30% goes to Africa, right? African leaders don't know this. So if we can position MIGA in a different way inside the bank will change. But as with all change processes, it is very hard to ask a bureaucracy to change itself. Unless the voice of the owners are clear what they want from us, we are not going to be able to change. So I'm looking towards my own country, Bangladesh. I'm looking towards India, and I'm looking towards Africa, because I think we will be judged, as Mr. Wolfenson said, by what we do for Africa. If your voices don't say what we need to be, we will never be what you need us to be. One comment I must say, whatever communique comes out of this G20, it must recognize that there is a revolution that's happening in Global South. All these examples we heard of energy transformation is not well known nor understood by the Global North. There is a revolution going on, and that revolution needs to be documented very, very strongly. And that's when you begin to pivot the MDBs into that story. So you've asked a tough question, and I think internally to the World Bank Group, we're all fastening our seatbelts, because I think this is going to be a tough journey in the next 6-7 months.
Damilola, you want to add something?
I think we're going to get there. I just, as someone who had to go through a World Bank process, I see it slightly differently. But I'm very, very glad that MIGA is having that voice. I'm very glad that MIGA is going to decentralize energy. And if you have concrete examples of what to do, I think this will be a role for the Nairobi conference, and possibly getting something, the Nairobi communique, on guarantee instruments. That's what African countries also want as security. But I would just plead with you that the process of going through a World Bank and MIGA process are 3 years of my life I can't get back, that I don't even think I saw my children, And it was for a country like Nigeria, where we flew back 24 of the smartest Nigerians I know, he knows in REA, to even go through that process. And I went to DC personally 21 times.
We are now
I just want us to be really honest about what it takes to get through the process.
Junaid, we're not going to belabor the point, but in today's world, we get loans on our apps. We have to move to MIGA to that app economy. I mean, I don't want to be frivolous, but
I've been in the World Bank 30 years, and I can proudly say that if the World Bank didn't exist, you would have to create the World Bank. That's how much I believe it's so important for the world.
Correct.
But it has come to a point where the world has changed. We have changed along with it, but we are at an inflection moment. In that inflection moment, we have to change significantly. And you're absolutely right. This is not going to be an easy process, right? But if we change, what every one of you today have said, the returns are so high, right? So I don't know if we can do an app, but the spirit of how you deliver is very, very important, right?
No, but listen, we believe in the bank and we wish you all the best to make this an effective tool for the transitions that all of us seek. And please join me in applauding Junaid for his intervention.